I sat at the bar with divorce papers in my purse and the taste of whiskey burning down my throat. 3 hours ago, I'd signed away 8 years of marriage in a lawyer's office, and now I was free. Free and completely fucking lost. Another? The bartender nodded at my empty glass. His eyes held that mixture of pity and curiosity I was rapidly growing to hate. Keep 'em coming. I pushed the glass toward him, watching the dim lights of the Chesapeake dive bar reflect in its crystal edges. My wedding ring finger felt naked, the pale strip of skin where it used to sit now exposed to the world like a dirty secret. My phone buzzed again, the 7th time in 2 hours. I knew without looking it would be my sister, or maybe one of my so-called friends wanting all the gory details about how Chester and I had finally imploded. Everyone loves a good divorce story when it's not their own. This seat taken? A man in a business suit gestured to the stool beside me. Yes, I lied, not even bothering to look up. By my dignity, what's left of it anyway? He mumbled something and moved along. I shouldn't have come here, a Thursday night at O'Malley's, where Chester and I had our first date. Some kind of masochistic pilgrimage. The jukebox was playing that Adele song about someone like you, because the universe has a sick sense of humor. When the bartender brought my fresh whiskey, I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. Megan Bell, 35, auburn hair that needed touching up at the roots, green eyes that looked hollow. Physical therapist, former wife, current mess. I downed half the drink in one gulp. The apartment would be empty when I got home. Chester had moved out a month ago, taking the leather couch, the good TV, and apparently my ability to believe in forever. I was left with an empty closet, a king-sized bed that now felt like an Arctic wasteland, and a collection of wedding photos I couldn't bring myself to trash yet. My phone vibrated again. This time I looked. Megan, please call me, I'm worried. My sister Kate, ever the responsible one. I texted back, I'm fine, just celebrating freedom. I added a champagne emoji that felt like a lie. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it this morning, half empty and echoing with silence. I kicked off my heels, dropped my purse and the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, and slumped onto the remaining furniture, a lumpy armchair Chester had deemed not worth taking. I should feel something profound, release, grief, anything. Instead, there was just a strange numbness, like I'd been given Novocaine for an emotional root canal. The phone rang. Kate again. Hey, I answered, trying to sound sober and put together. It's done? She asked. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm officially no longer Mrs. Chester Bennett. Do you need me to come over? God, no, I said too quickly. I'm just going to sleep for about a year. After assuring Kate I wouldn't do anything stupid and promising to call tomorrow, I hung up and stared at the ceiling. The white paint was cracking slightly in the corner, something else that needed fixing. 3 more calls came through before midnight, my mother, my friend Jill, and surprisingly my former mother-in-law, who left a voicemail saying, "He never deserved you anyway, dear." That almost made me cry. I spent the night on the armchair, not ready to face the bedroom. Dreams came in fitful bursts, Chester laughing with some faceless woman, me trying to run but my legs not working, standing in an empty room calling for someone who never answered. Morning light filtered through blinds I hadn't bothered to close. My neck ached from the awkward sleeping position, and my mouth tasted like something had died in it. I stumbled to the kitchen, where the divorce papers sat like an accusation. Well, I said to the empty apartment, day 1 of the rest of your life, Megan. Try not to screw this one up too. The coffee machine, mine in the settlement, gurgled in sympathy. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calls from well-meaning friends, a trip to the grocery store where I bought only wine and ice cream, and finally, a moment of clarity while scrolling through job listings online. Sports medicine clinic seeking experienced physical therapist. Maybe what I needed wasn't another night wallowing in self-pity. Maybe what I needed was to remember who Megan Bell was before she became Megan Bennett and then Megan Bell again. I applied for the job before I could talk myself out of it. 5 minutes later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Sometimes the universe has a sick sense of humor, and sometimes, just sometimes, it throws you a lifeline instead. The Chesapeake Sports Medicine Clinic was housed in a renovated warehouse with exposed brick walls and gleaming hardwood floors. 2 weeks after my divorce was finalized, I found myself standing at the reception desk, clutching my new employee badge like it was some kind of life raft. Dr. Matthews is waiting for you in the staff room, the receptionist said, giving me a practiced smile. Down the hall, second door on your left. I nodded and followed her directions, my sensible shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The clinic smelled of antiseptic, and that particular blend of sweat and determination unique to rehabilitation centers. It was familiar, safe. Everything my personal life wasn't. Dr. Matthews, call me Jack, was a broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He spent 30 minutes going over clinic policies before handing me my first week's schedule. We have several athletes from the local university, he explained, plus a few pros who live in the area. You'll mainly be handling the swimming team injuries. I saw your specialization in shoulder rehabilitation. I nodded, grateful for the focus on work, rather than the awkward getting-to-know-you questions that might lead to mentions of my recent divorce. Your first patient comes in at 11, Jack said, glancing at his watch. That gives you an hour to get familiar with the equipment and review her file. Any questions? I shook my head and took the manila folder he offered. After he left, I flipped it open to find the medical history of Esme Young, 29, professional swimmer, suffering from rotator cuff tendinitis in her right shoulder. The file included a newspaper clipping of her winning a national championship 2 years earlier. The photo showed a woman with determined eyes and the powerful shoulders of a dedicated swimmer, her blonde hair tucked under a cap as she emerged from the water. The therapy room assigned to me was spacious, with a treatment table in the center and various pieces of equipment organized neatly against the walls. I spent the time familiarizing myself with the layout, grateful for the distraction from thoughts about my empty apartment and the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. At precisely 11, there was a knock on the door. Come in, I called, straightening my clinic polo shirt and professional smile. The woman who entered was taller than I expected, with the lean, muscular build of a swimmer. Her blonde hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and her eyes were a startling blue that reminded me of the Caribbean waters from my honeymoon, a memory I quickly pushed aside. Esme Young? I extended my hand. I'm Megan Bell, your physical therapist. Nice to meet you. Her handshake was firm, her palms slightly calloused. Thanks for fitting me in. This shoulder is driving me crazy. That's what I'm here for. I gestured to the treatment table. Have a seat and we'll get started. As she sat, I noticed she was wearing a university t-shirt that had seen better days and athletic shorts that revealed long, toned legs. Professional, Megan, I reminded myself. She's a patient. So the file says rotator cuff tendinitis, I said, moving into safe clinical territory. When did the pain start? About 2 months ago. She rotated her shoulder with a slight grimace. I ignored it at first, stupid, I know, but now it's affecting my training times. I nodded, making notes. Mind if I take a look? She pulled her t-shirt aside at the neck to expose her shoulder, and I moved behind her to examine it. Her skin was warm under my fingers as I pressed gently around the joint, noting the areas that made her tense. Does this hurt? I asked, applying slight pressure. Yeah, she breathed, and I couldn't help but notice the way her pulse jumped in her neck. I stepped back, creating professional distance. We'll start with some gentle stretches and electrical stimulation today. I think with consistent therapy, we can have you back to full strength within a few weeks. That's great news, she said, offering a smile that created a small dimple in her left cheek. I have qualifiers coming up in 2 months. As I set up the electrical stimulation pads, I found myself glancing at her profile more than necessary. There was something magnetic about her focus, the way she stared determinedly at the motivational poster on the wall while I worked. So, how long have you been at this clinic? She asked as I attached the electrodes to her shoulder. This is actually my first day. No kidding? She turned to look at me, her face closer than I expected. Well, you seem like you know what you're doing. I've been a physical therapist for 10 years, I explained. Just new to this particular clinic. What brought you here? She asked. A divorce, a desperate need for change, a middle-of-the-night panic attack about starting over at 35. Just time for something new, I said instead. She nodded as if she understood all the things I wasn't saying. The session continued with exercises and stretches, my hands occasionally guiding her movements. Each time our skin made contact, I noticed an odd tingling sensation that I attributed to static electricity from the exercise mats. Same time Thursday? she asked as she gathered her things at the end of the session. I'll be here, I replied, washing my hands at the sink to hide the inexplicable flutter in my stomach. Ice that shoulder tonight, 20 minutes on, 20% off. She paused at the door. Thanks, Megan. I have a good feeling about you. After she left, I stood in the empty treatment room, wondering why her casual comment had left me feeling strangely flustered. It was just professional appreciation, I told myself. Nothing more. But as I prepared for my next patient, I found myself looking forward to Thursday in a way that had nothing to do with professional satisfaction, and everything to do with those blue eyes and that dimpled smile. Remarkable improvement, I said, recording Esme's range of motion in her chart. 3 weeks of therapy sessions had brought significant progress to her shoulder. Her skin was warm under my fingers as I guided her through the final stretch of our third session. All thanks to you, she replied, those blue eyes locking onto mine for a heartbeat too long. Hey, I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee after this? I have some questions about training regimens. The question caught me off guard. In 3 weeks of sessions, we'd developed an easy rapport, but this was the first invitation to extend our relationship beyond these clinic walls. I shouldn't, I started, then paused. Why shouldn't I? She was nearly done with her treatment. Besides, it was just coffee. Actually, yes. That would be fine. An hour later, we sat in a corner booth at Harborview Cafe, steam rising between us from ceramic mugs. I'd changed out of my clinic polo into a green blouse that Kate always said brought out my eyes. Not that it mattered what Esme thought of my eyes. So, training regimens? I prompted, wrapping my hands around my mug. Esme smiled sheepishly. That might have been a bit of a pretext. I just wanted to talk outside the clinic. You're easy to talk to. Something fluttered in my chest. Oh? My life is mostly chlorine and protein shakes. Sometimes I need conversations that don't revolve around split times and competition strategies. I nodded, understanding the need to be seen as more than your profession. What would you like to talk about then? Tell me something about Megan that isn't in your professional bio. I laughed, surprised by her directness. Well, I make a killer lasagna. I'm terrified of moths. Don't laugh, they're butterflies of death, and I'm recently divorced. I hadn't meant to say that last part. It had slipped out like a confession. I'm sorry, she said, her expression softening. Recent as in 3 weeks before I started at the clinic. She nodded, not offering the platitudes I'd come to expect. Instead, she said, That's why you took the job. That obvious? New beginnings usually follow endings. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Was it a long marriage? 8 years. Not the worst divorce, just disappointing. I surprised myself by continuing. We didn't fight. That was the problem. We just stopped trying altogether. She listened intently as I shared more than I had with anyone except my sister. There was something about her presence, a calm acceptance that made words flow easily. The cafe dimmed its lights as afternoon slipped into evening. We'd been talking for nearly 2 hours. I should get going, I said reluctantly, checking my watch. Me too, morning practice. She left a generous tip and insisted on paying for our coffees. At the door, she surprised me with a quick hug. Thanks for this. I needed it more than another shoulder exercise. Her hair smelled like citrus and chlorine, an oddly appealing combination. I stepped back, flustered by my awareness of her scent. See you Thursday? She asked. I'll be there. I drove home smiling, feeling lighter than I had in months. The empty apartment didn't seem quite as hollow. I'd made a friend, that's all. A perfectly normal friendship with a patient who was almost done with her treatment. My phone rang as I was heating up leftover Thai food. So, Kate said without preamble, did the divorce papers spontaneously combust yet, or are you still moping? Hello to you too, favorite sister. Only sister, she corrected. Seriously, how are you? Better, actually. The new job is good. I had coffee with someone today. Someone? Male someone? Female someone? Robot someone? I rolled my eyes. A patient. Esme. She's a swimmer with a shoulder injury. A patient, Kate repeated skeptically. Is that ethical? It was just coffee, Kate. Professional discussion. For how long? I hesitated. 2 hours. Professional. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, she said in a tone that meant exactly the opposite. Just that you've mentioned my patient Esme in every conversation we've had for 3 weeks. I have not, I protested, mentally reviewing our recent calls. Had I really kept bringing her up? Monday, my patient Esme broke her personal record even with the injury. Friday before that, my patient Esme brought me coffee because I mentioned I was tired. The Friday before that. Okay, she's friendly, we're friendly, it's nice. Megan? Kate's voice softened. When was the last time you were excited to talk about someone like this? The question lingered uncomfortably. She's a friend, I insisted, more to myself than Kate. After hanging up, I stood at my kitchen window, watching the harbor lights shimmer on the water. Kate's words echoed in my mind as I remembered Esme's smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. That night, I dreamed of swimming in crystal blue water the exact shade of Esme's eyes. I woke feeling both rested and unsettled, uncertain why my mind kept circling back to her. Thursday couldn't come fast enough, and that realization scared me more than I cared to admit. Downtown Chesapeake had transformed for fall, with pumpkin-themed displays and shop windows and golden leaves drifting onto the cobblestone streets. I had just finished a Saturday shift at the clinic, my mind still occupied with Esme's final therapy session earlier that week. She'd been officially cleared to return to full training, which meant our regular appointments were over. The thought left me with an unexpected emptiness. I walked slowly, not quite ready to return to my apartment. The late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows as I passed storefronts, pausing occasionally to window shop. That's when I noticed the poster in the local bookstore window, a black and white photo of Humphrey Bogart with bold text proclaiming Chesapeake Classic Film Society, Film Noir Festival starting next Friday. I stepped closer, reading the details. The group met weekly to watch and discuss classic films, beginning with Double Indemnity. I'd always loved old movies, something Chester had merely tolerated rather than shared. Running my fingers over the glass, I took a mental note of the location, the community art center, and time. Maybe this was exactly what I needed, a new hobby, new people, a reason to leave my apartment on Friday nights. The following Friday arrived with a blustery chill that had me wrapping my scarf tighter as I approached the arts center. The building was a renovated warehouse similar to the clinic, but with more character. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, and vintage movie posters adorned the exposed brick walls. About 20 people milled around a reception area, where a silver-haired woman was checking names off a list. "First time?" she asked when I approached. I nodded, suddenly nervous. "Megan Bell. I saw the poster in the bookstore window." "Welcome, Megan. I'm Dorothy, club secretary. We're showing Double Indemnity tonight. Have you seen it before?" "Years ago," I admitted. "It's one of my favorites." "Mine too." A familiar voice behind me sent a jolt of recognition down my spine. I turned to see Esme, bundled in a burgundy peacoat with a cream-colored scarf, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. "Esme?" I couldn't mask my surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you, apparently. Coming to see a classic film." Her smile was warm in the dim lighting. "I didn't take you for a noir fan." Yes, I love them," I managed, strangely flustered. "The lighting, the dialogue, the moral ambiguity. The dangerous women," she added with a hint of mischief in her eyes. Dorothy looked between us. "You two know each other?" Megan fixed my shoulder, Esme explained, rotating it easily to demonstrate. "Best physical therapist in Chesapeake." I felt heat rise to my cheeks at the praise. "Just doing my job." "Well, how wonderful," Dorothy beamed. "Esme's one of our most dedicated members. She can introduce you to everyone." Before I could respond, we were ushered into the screening room, which had been set up with rows of comfortable chairs facing a large projection screen. Esme naturally guided me toward 2 open seats near the middle. "So," I whispered as we settled in, "professional swimmer by day, film noir enthusiast by night?" "I contain multitudes," she replied with a wink. "Actually, I minored in film studies in college. These Friday sessions are my little escape from the pool." The lights dimmed before I could respond, and the iconic opening scenes of Double Indemnity flickered to life on the screen. I tried to focus on Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, but my awareness of Esme beside me was distracting. Our arms shared the narrow armrest, and each accidental brush of skin sent a small current through me. When Stanwyck delivered the famous line about the husband having an accident, Esme leaned close to whisper, She's playing him like a violin. Her breath was warm against my ear, carrying the faint scent of cinnamon. I nodded, not trusting my voice. After the film, the group moved to a small adjoining cafe for discussion. Esme introduced me to everyone, her hand occasionally touching my arm or shoulder to guide me through the crowd. Each touch lingered in my awareness like the afterimage of a camera flash. The discussion was lively, with passionate debates about film techniques and character motivations. I found myself speaking up more than I'd expected, drawing on half-remembered film classes from college. Esme watched me with what seemed like admiration as I analyzed the lighting techniques in the murder scene. "You've been holding out on me," she said when the group finally began to disperse around 11. "All those therapy sessions and you never mentioned your film expertise." I laughed. It hardly came up between shoulder rotations. We stepped outside into the autumn night, where the temperature had dropped further. My breath formed small clouds in the air. "Which way are you headed?" she asked. "Harbor Apartments, about 15 minutes that way." I pointed east. "I'm heading that direction too. Mind if I walk with you?" We strolled side by side down the quiet streets, our conversation flowing from the film to books to music. When she mentioned her favorite jazz record, our hands brushed accidentally. Neither of us pulled away for several steps. "This is me," I finally said, stopping in front of my building. The moment felt charged somehow, like the pivotal scene in a film where everything could change with a single decision. "I'm glad you came tonight," she said, her blue eyes reflecting the streetlight above us. "It's nice seeing you outside the clinic." "It was fun," I agreed, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. "Maybe I'll come back next week?" "They're showing The Maltese Falcon," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Bogart at his best. He'll be there." For a moment, I thought she might lean closer, but instead she stepped back with a smile. "Good night, Megan." "Good night, Esme." I watched her walk away, her silhouette gradually disappearing into the darkness. Only when she was gone did I realize I'd been holding my breath. Upstairs in my apartment, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. I looked alive in a way I hadn't in years. And it terrified me. 3 weeks of Friday film nights had passed, each one ending with Esme walking me home, our conversations growing deeper while our hands occasionally brushed against each other in the darkness. Tonight had been Sunset Boulevard, and we were debating the film's merits over late-night burgers at a 24-hour diner near the harbor. "All I'm saying is that Norma Desmond wasn't crazy, she was just ahead of her time," Esme insisted, stealing one of my fries. "The industry discarded her, not the other way around." "Fair point." I smiled, watching how animated she became when discussing film. Her passion was infectious, though I'm not sure murder was the best career comeback strategy. She laughed, and my chest tightened at the sound. These outings had become the highlight of my week, though I kept telling myself we were just friends. Friends who sometimes stared at each other a beat too long. Friends whose fingers sometimes lingered when passing the salt. "So," Esme said, suddenly looking a bit nervous, "I've been meaning to tell you something." My heart skipped. "Oh?" "I play bass in a band, not professionally or anything, just for fun." She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "We're called Voltage, all women." "A band?" I raised my eyebrows, trying to picture it. "Like rock music?" "Indie rock with some punk influences. We've got a show this Saturday night at the Anchor. I'd really like it if you came." The vulnerability in her request made it impossible to refuse. "I'd love to." Saturday evening found me standing outside the Anchor, a dive bar near the waterfront that I'd passed countless times but never entered. The neon sign buzzed above the door, and muffled music spilled onto the street as people trickled in. I'd spent embarrassingly long deciding what to wear before settling on dark jeans and a deep green top that Kate had once described as hot but not trying too hard. Inside, the bar was dimly lit and already crowded. I claimed a spot near the small stage where a drum kit and amplifiers were set up, feeling oddly nervous. I'd never seen Esme outside our therapy sessions or film discussions. This was yet another layer to her I was about to discover. The lights dimmed further, and the crowd's chatter quieted as 4 women took the stage. Esme appeared last, bass guitar slung low across her hips, hair pulled back in a way I'd never seen before. She looked different, confident in a raw, electric way that caught me off guard. A tall woman with jet black hair took the microphone. "We're Voltage. Let's make some noise." The first chord hit like a physical force. Esme's fingers moved skillfully across her bass strings, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. I couldn't take my eyes off her. This wasn't the measured, disciplined athlete or the thoughtful film enthusiast. This was someone else entirely, someone wild and free and magnetic. They played for nearly an hour, songs about heartbreak and rebellion and desire. Esme spotted me in the crowd during their third song, and the smile she flashed made my stomach flip. When they finished their set, the audience erupted in applause. "What did you think?" Esme appeared at my side, slightly sweaty and radiantly happy. "You were amazing," I said honestly. "I had no idea you could play like that." "Full of surprises, that's me," she grinned. "Come on, I want you to meet the band." She led me through the crowd to a small area behind the stage where her bandmates were packing up equipment. "Everyone, this is Megan," she announced. "Megan, this is Voltage." The dark-haired singer stepped forward first. "Jessica Bennett," she said, offering a firm handshake. "Lead vocals and rhythm guitar." She had intense gray eyes that seemed to be assessing me carefully. The others introduced themselves as well, a redhead named Zoe on drums, and a brunette called Diane who played lead guitar. They were welcoming, though I caught Jessica watching closely whenever Esme leaned toward me or touched my arm while talking. "How did you all meet?" I asked, as we helped them load equipment into Zoe's van. "College," Diane answered. Except for Jessica, she found us at an open mic night and decided we needed a real vocalist instead of Esme's wounded cat impressions. "My singing isn't that bad," Esme protested. Jessica laughed, her expression softening. "It's exactly that bad, sweetie." There was an ease between them that spoke of years of friendship and shared history. As we finished loading the van, Jessica pulled Esme aside for a private conversation, their heads close together. I tried not to watch, but couldn't help noticing how Jessica glanced in my direction several times. Later, as everyone was saying goodbyes in the parking lot, Jessica approached me while Esme was distracted. "She talks about you a lot," she said simply. I wasn't sure how to respond. "We're friends." Jessica's mouth curved into a knowing smile. "If you say so." She handed me a flyer. "We're looking for a backup vocalist. Esme mentioned you sing." What? "No, I don't really. Just think about it." She rejoined the others before I could protest further. Esme drove me home afterward, her car filled with the lingering energy of the performance. "You really have a whole secret life I knew nothing about," I said as we parked outside my building. She turned to face me, expression serious in the dashboard lights. "Not secret, just waiting for the right time to share it." Something shifted between us in that moment, an acknowledgement of whatever had been growing these past weeks. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said softly. "Thank you for inviting me." Neither of us moved to leave the car. The air felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. "Jessica wants me to audition as a backup vocalist," I finally said, breaking the tension. Esme's face lit up. "Really? That would be amazing! We've been looking for someone, and I may have mentioned hearing you sing along to the radio once during therapy." "I can't believe you," I laughed, both flattered and mortified. "Please say you'll think about it." Her enthusiasm was contagious. "I'll think about it." As I climbed the stairs to my apartment later, Jessica's words echoed in my mind. "She talks about you a lot." I fell asleep with Voltage's songs in my head and the image of Esme on stage, transformed and luminous, playing just for me. My phone lit up at 12:37 a.m., Esme's name flashing on the screen. We'd been texting regularly since the concert 3 days ago, but a call this late was unusual. I answered immediately, concern tightening my chest. "Esme, is everything okay?" "Megan." Her voice sounded strange, tight and uncertain. "I know it's late, I'm sorry." "It's fine. What's wrong?" A long pause. "Can we meet tomorrow? For lunch?" Another pause. "There's something I need to talk to you about. Something important." My heart stuttered in my chest. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Yes. No, I don't know." She gave a nervous laugh. "Just, can we meet at Harborview Cafe, 1 o'clock? "I'll be there," I promised. After hanging up, sleep became impossible. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities. Was she moving, injured again? Or was it something to do with the strange energy that had been building between us? The next day crawled by. I went through the motions with my morning patients, checking the clock obsessively. By 12:30, I was already at Harborview, claiming the same corner booth we'd sat in weeks ago. Esme arrived precisely at 1, looking like she hadn't slept much either. She wore a simple blue blouse that matched her eyes, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. My stomach flipped at the sight of her. "Hey," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. "Hey yourself. You had me worried." She fiddled with a sugar packet, not meeting my eyes. "Sorry about the late call." We ordered coffee for both of us, though neither seemed interested in food. The silence stretched uncomfortably until our drinks arrived. "So," I finally prompted, "what's this important thing?" Esme took a deep breath, then finally looked directly at me. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this, and there's really no easy way." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Megan, I have feelings for you, romantic feelings." The world seemed to pause. Though some part of me had suspected, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a shock through my system. "I know this might be a lot," she continued when I didn't respond. "You're recently divorced, I was your patient, we're just becoming friends. There are a dozen reasons why I should have kept this to myself." "Esme. But I can't stop thinking about you," she rushed on. "When we're at film night, when we're texting, even when I'm swimming, you're constantly in my head. And I hope, there might be something on your side too." My heart hammered against my ribs. Everything she was saying resonated with feelings I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. But admitting that felt terrifying. "I've never felt this way about a woman before," I finally confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Hope flashed in her eyes. Neither had I, until my junior year of college. "I don't know what to do with these feelings." My hands trembled slightly around my coffee cup. "I'm scared, Esme." "Of what?" "Of being wrong again. Of misreading everything. Of ruining what we already have." She reached across the table, her fingers hovering near mine without touching. "I'm scared too, but I think what's between us is worth exploring." A memory flashed in my mind, Chester's voice during our last fight. "You'll never find love again, Megan. You don't know how to open yourself up enough." Panic rose in my throat, sudden and overwhelming. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my coffee. "I can't do this," I said, grabbing my purse. "I'm sorry, I just can't." "Megan, wait." But I was already moving toward the door, ignoring the stares from other customers. Outside, I gulped in the cool air, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The look on Esme's face, hope collapsing into hurt, burned in my memory. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, eventually finding myself at the harbor walkway. Sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I called the one person who would understand. "I think I'm having a breakdown," I told Kate when she answered. "What happened?" Her voice was instantly alert. "Esme told me she has feelings for me." A pause. "And this is a breakdown because I think I have feelings for her too," I admitted for the first time. "And it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because she's a woman. Because I just got divorced. Because Chester was right, I don't know how to do relationships." Kate sighed. "First, forget what Chester said. That was divorce talk, not truth. Second, yes, she's a woman. Does that actually bother you, or are you just surprised?" I thought about Esme, her smile, her passion, her kindness. "I'm surprised by how much it doesn't bother me." "Then maybe stop running and start talking to her instead of me." The wisdom in Kate's words was irritating but undeniable. I hung up after promising to keep her updated, then sat watching the sunset paint the harbor waters in shades of orange and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Esme. "I understand if you need space, no pressure. I'm here when you're ready to talk." Her understanding only made the ache in my chest worse. I'd run away like a coward instead of being honest. Esme deserved better. As darkness fell over the harbor, I made a decision. Whatever this was between us, friendship, attraction, something more, I couldn't keep pretending it didn't exist. The question was whether I had the courage to find out what it could become. 3 days of silence stretched between us after I fled the cafe. 3 days of composing texts I never sent. Of reaching for the phone only to put it down again. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts at the clinic to keep my mind occupied. But thoughts of Esme remained, hovering at the edge of every moment. On the fourth day, Jessica Bennett called me. Audition. Tonight. 7 o'clock at Zoe's garage. Her tone brooked no argument. Jessica, I don't think. Just show up, Belle. Esme won't be there if that's what you're worried about. Swimming meet in Richmond. I hesitated, relief and disappointment battling inside me. I'm not a singer. Let me be the judge of that. She hung up before I could protest further. That evening, I found myself standing outside a detached garage behind a craftsman bungalow in East Chesapeake. Music leaked through the walls, someone playing guitar, stopping, starting again. I nearly turned back twice before finally knocking. Jessica opened the door, appraising me with those intense gray eyes. You came! The garage had been converted into a practice space, with sound-dampening panels on the walls, a drum kit in one corner, and various amplifiers scattered around. Zoe sat behind her drums while Diane tuned her guitar on a battered couch. Our vocalist has arrived, Jessica announced. I haven't agreed to anything, I protested. Jessica ignored this. Esme mentioned Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. We've been working on a cover. I haven't sung in front of people since college karaoke. Perfect. No bad habits to unlearn. Jessica handed me a lyric sheet. We'll start slow. Before I could object further, Diane began playing the opening notes. The familiar melody wrapped around me like an old friend. Jessica nodded encouragingly, and when the moment came, I started singing. My voice wavered initially, but as the first verse progressed, I found my footing. The music had always been there inside me, a quiet companion through the years of my marriage when singing was limited to shower performances and car radio solos. When we finished, silence hung in the air. Then Zoe let out a low whistle. Damn, therapist? You've been holding out. It wasn't horrible, Jessica conceded, which seemed high praise given her expression. Let's try something more up-tempo. We spent 2 hours working through their repertoire. With each song, my confidence grew, therapy for a wound I hadn't recognized. By the end of the session, we were laughing together, the initial awkwardness dissolved by shared music. So, Jessica said as we packed up, rehearsals are Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have a gig next month at the Black Duck. I blinked. Wait, are you asking me to join the band? Keeping up, aren't you? Jessica's smile softened her sarcasm. Backup vocals to start, maybe more eventually. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Diane called from across the room. We need someone who can actually sing when Jessica blows her voice out screaming the angry songs. I thought about how it had felt to sing again after so long. The release, the joy. Yes, I said, surprising myself. I'd like that. Walking to my car later, Jessica fell into step beside me. Esme didn't put me up to this, The band needed a vocalist. You fit. I nodded, not trusting my voice. But, she continued, leaning against my car door, she's my best friend, and she's hurting. Whatever's happening between you two, be careful with her heart. I'm still figuring things out, I admitted. Aren't we all? She pushed off from my car. See you Tuesday, vocalist. That night, I texted Esme for the first time since the cafe. I auditioned for Voltage tonight. Jessica says I'm in. Her response came quickly. That's amazing. They're lucky to have you. The simple exchange broke the ice. Over the next 2 weeks, we cautiously rebuilt our communication through texts about band rehearsals and swimming competitions. I learned how to harmonize with Jessica's powerful vocals while Esme won silver at her qualifying meet in Richmond. By the time she returned to Chesapeake, things between us had shifted into a tentative friendship. We didn't discuss her confession or my reaction, but the awareness of both hung between us like an unplayed note. After Tuesday's rehearsal in late October, I was packing up my things when Esme appeared in the garage doorway. My heart stuttered at the sight of her. Hey, she said, blue eyes uncertain. Jessica told me you've been killing it at rehearsals. I wouldn't go that far, I smiled, suddenly shy. But it's been fun. I'm glad. She stepped into the space, guitar case in hand. I missed a lot while I was away. The others had already left, leaving us alone among the instruments and trailing cables. She set her guitar down and moved to the keyboard in the corner. Want to see something? She asked, her fingers hovering over the keys. I nodded, moving closer as she began to play. The melody was simple but beautiful, something I didn't recognize. "It's an original," she explained, still playing. "Jessica and I have been working on it. It's lovely. Here, let me show you the basic chord progression." She scooted over on the bench, making space for me. I sat beside her, hyper-aware of our shoulders touching. She guided my right hand to the keys, her fingers warm against mine. "Like this," she said softly, pressing my fingers down on the proper keys. The notes rang out clear and true. We stayed like that, her teaching me the simple melody, our hands occasionally overlapping. The tension between us gradually transformed into something else, a harmony, a possibility. When I finally mastered the sequence, her smile was worth every fumbled note. "You're a natural," she said, her face close to mine. "I have a good teacher." In the quiet that followed, I realized that sometimes the bravest music comes from the notes we're most afraid to play. The crowd at the Black Duck was twice the size of Voltage's last show, the small venue packed with people pressed shoulder to shoulder. I peered through the stage curtain, my stomach churning with pre-performance jitters. First show nerves? Jessica appeared beside me, already in performance mode with her dark hair wild and dramatic eyeliner emphasizing her gray eyes. "Is it that obvious?" My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the microphone stand. "Just channel it into your performance." She squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this, Belle." The past month of rehearsals had transformed me in ways I barely recognized. My voice had grown stronger, my confidence steadier. The band had become a second family, Zoe with her dirty jokes, Diane with her technical perfectionism, Jessica with her fierce leadership, and Esme. Esme had become something else entirely. Since that night at the keyboard, we'd developed a careful dance of almost touches and meaningful glances. Neither of us had spoken directly about her confession, but something had definitely shifted between us. 5 minutes, ladies." The venue manager poked his head backstage. Diane and Zoe joined us, followed by Esme, who wore a form-fitting black tank top that showcased the swimmer's muscles in her arms. She caught me looking and smiled. "Ready for your debut?" she asked, tuning her bass with practiced fingers. Before I could answer, I caught sight of a familiar figure entering the bar. My blood turned to ice. "Chester?" I whispered, disbelieving. My ex-husband stood just inside the entrance, scanning the crowd. His business casual attire stood out among the predominantly leather and denim crowd. "What?" Esme followed my gaze. "Is that my ex?" "What the hell is he doing here?" Jessica overheard. "Want me to have security throw him out?" I shook my head, mind racing. "No, I don't understand why he's here." "It's showtime," the manager called. "You're on!" The lights dimmed, and the crowd's roar swelled as we took our positions. My heart hammered against my ribs, but not from stage fright any longer. Chester's unexpected presence had thrown me completely off balance. Jessica's powerful opening note pulled me back to the moment. The show. Focus on the show. I raised my microphone and joined in on the chorus as planned, forcing myself to lock eyes with audience members in the front row, instead of searching for Chester. Music filled the space between my scattered thoughts, giving me something solid to cling to. 3 songs in, I finally spotted him again, leaning against the bar with a beer in hand. He was watching me intently, an unreadable expression on his face. I faltered briefly before Esme stepped closer, her presence beside me an anchor. "You okay?" she mouthed during Jessica's guitar solo. I nodded, drawing strength from her concern. The set continued, and gradually I lost myself in the performance, the way Jessica had taught me. By our closing number, I'd almost forgotten Chester was there, until I saw him making his way toward the stage as we took our final bow. "He's coming over," I hissed to Esme as we headed backstage. "Want me to run interference?" Before I could answer, Chester appeared in the backstage doorway, sidestepping a security guard with a charming smile and a lie about being with the band. "Megan." He looked different somehow, thinner, more uncertain than I remembered. "You were amazing up there." "What are you doing here, Chester?" I kept my voice level despite the adrenaline still coursing through me. "I heard from Kate you were performing tonight." Of course Kate would tell him, Despite everything, she still had a soft spot for her former brother-in-law. That doesn't explain why you came. Chester ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from our marriage. Can we talk? Privately? I felt Esme stiffen beside me. The rest of the band had formed a protective semicircle at my back. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here, I told him, drawing strength from their presence. He hesitated, eyes darting between me and my bandmates. Fine. I miss you, Meg. I made a mistake. These past few months without you have been hell. The words I might have desperately wanted to hear 6 months ago now fell flat. You're only saying this because I'm moving on. No, it's not that, he insisted. Seeing you up there, you're glowing. You look happier than you ever did with me, and it made me realize what I threw away. A strange calm settled over me. You're right. I am happier. His eyes flickered to Esme, who stood silently at my side. Something passed across his face, understanding perhaps. Is there someone else? He asked quietly. The question hung in the air. I could feel Esme's tension beside me, the band's collective held breath behind me. In that moment, everything clarified. There's me, I said firmly. I found myself again, that's what's different. Chester nodded slowly, a sad smile forming. I can see that. He stepped back. I won't bother you again. I just needed to be sure. After he left, Jessica broke the silence. Well, that was dramatic. Drinks? I think we all need one after that performance, both on and off stage. Later, as the celebration wound down at a nearby bar, Esme and I found ourselves alone at a corner table. You handled that really well, she said, nursing her seltzer water. I surprised myself, I admitted. 6 months ago, I might have gone back to him. And now? Rain began pattering against the windows, growing steadier by the second. I looked at Esme, really looked at her, taking in the questioning blue eyes, the gentle curve of her lips, the patient way she'd stood beside me without interfering. Now I know what I want, I said softly. We left together, stepping out into the downpour that had emptied the streets. Without an umbrella, we were drenched within seconds, laughing as we ran for shelter in a nearby doorway. Pressed together in the shallow alcove, water dripping from our hair and clothes, I felt a surge of certainty. I reached up, cupping her face in my hands, and kissed her. Her lips were soft and warm against mine, tasting of rain and possibility. After a moment's surprise, she responded, her hands finding my waist, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, washing away months of hesitation and doubt. When we finally broke apart, breathless, the rain seemed less important. I've been wanting to do that for so long, she whispered against my lips. Me too, I admitted. I was just scared. And now? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now I'm not. East Coast tour? I stared at Jessica, certain I'd misheard. As in multiple cities? It was 2 months after my doorway kiss with Esme, and Voltage was crammed into Zoe's garage for an emergency band meeting. Jessica paced excitedly, waving an email printout. 6 cities in 3 weeks. Boston, New York, Philly, Baltimore, D.C., and back to Chesapeake for the finale. Jessica could barely contain herself. An indie label in Brooklyn caught our YouTube videos. They're sponsoring the whole thing. Holy shit, Diane whispered, wide-eyed. When? Esme asked, her fingers intertwined with mine on the couch we shared. 3 weeks from now. Jessica looked directly at me. I know it's short notice. We all have jobs, lives. But this is our shot. My mind raced. 3 weeks on the road. Leaving my patients, requesting time off from the clinic I'd only worked at for 6 months. It seemed impossible. I don't know if I can, I began. You can. Esme squeezed my hand. If you want to. That night, curled beside Esme in my apartment, I voiced my fears. What if Dr. Matthews won't give me leave? What if I'm not ready for this? Esme propped herself up on one elbow, her blonde hair falling around her face like a curtain. You were born ready. You just forgot for a while. I traced the curve of her cheek, still amazed I could touch her this way. When did you get so wise? Around the same time you got so brave. She kissed me softly. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Dr. Matthews, expecting resistance. Instead, he surprised me. A music tour? That's fantastic, Megan. His eyes crinkled at the corners. Take the leave. Your patients will be here when you get back. 2.5 weeks later, we were loading equipment into a rented van, embarking on an adventure I'd never imagined for myself. The tour was a whirlwind of small venues, cheap motels, and exhilarating performances. In Boston, we opened for a local band with a devoted following. In New York, we played a midnight set at a legendary club in the Lower East Side. Each city brought new experiences, new audiences, and new dimensions to my relationship with Esme. Away from Chesapeake and our everyday lives, we discovered each other in hotel rooms across the eastern seaboard. In Philadelphia, she taught me to play wild horses on her guitar, sitting behind me with her arms around my waist. In Baltimore, we slow danced in our hotel room to scratchy jazz playing on an ancient clock radio. It was in Providence, after a particularly electric show, that I found myself sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, watching Esme emerge from the shower wrapped in a towel. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "You look serious." The words rose naturally to my lips. "I was thinking I've never felt this way about anyone before." She sat beside me, water droplets still glistening on her shoulders. "Good way or terrifying way?" "Both." I laughed softly. "I was so afraid of this, of us, for so long. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it." She took my hand, bringing it to her lips. "You don't have to." Later that night, as she slept beside me, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. 6 months ago, I'd been a newly divorced physical therapist struggling to rebuild my life. Now I was on tour with a rock band, falling deeper in love with a woman who had crashed into my carefully constructed walls and shown me what lay beyond them. The tour culminated with our return to Chesapeake, playing to a hometown crowd that included Kate, my clinic colleagues, and even a few of my patients. Standing on stage with Esme beside me, Jessica commanding the front, and the audience singing our lyrics back to us, I felt a completion I'd never experienced before. After the final show, as we celebrated at our regular bar, Kate pulled me aside. "So this is your life now?" she asked, gesturing toward Esme, who was laughing with Jessica across the room. "Music and love and adventure?" "Not just that," I told her. "I'm still a physical therapist, still me, just more of me than before." 6 months later, our lives had found a new rhythm. I returned to the clinic part-time. Voltage recorded an EP that was getting college radio play, and Esme qualified for Olympic trials. We moved into a loft apartment near the harbor with enough room for both her swimming trophies and my growing collection of vintage records. On a warm spring evening, we strolled along the Chesapeake waterfront, the same path where I'd once sat alone contemplating the ruins of my marriage. "Remember when you first invited me to film night?" I asked, our fingers laced together as we walked. "You mean when I pretended to be a noir film enthusiast just to spend more time with you?" She grinned. "Yes, I remember." "You weren't pretending." "Only a little." She bumped her shoulder against mine. "I'd have developed an interest in competitive stamp collecting if that's what it took to see you outside the clinic." I laughed, leaning into her. "I'm glad it was films instead." We stopped at the edge of the pier, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "You know," Esme said thoughtfully, "when I injured my shoulder last year, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen to my swimming career. And now?" She turned to me, the fading sunlight illuminating her face. "Now I know it was the best thing that ever happened to me." I kissed her then, with the taste of possibility on my lips, and the certainty that sometimes, the endings we fear most lead to beginnings we never dared imagine.